life on the Great Plains could be a lonely existence for settlers, but as towns developed, so too did opportunities for art and entertainment that could bring communities together.
The human race is really a social group. So entertainment was a big thing to be able to socialize, to be entertained, to be happy, and to meet people. As people came to northwestern Kansas to settle in the late 1800s, you have to remember that most of them were young people. You had to be 21 years old to get a homestead, so you had people at 21, a lot of them were single, or you're a newly married couple trying to come out to make a home for your own and you might not have any children. So entertainment was very popular. You have young people here that were young, healthy people, and they needed entertainment. It may range in the early days from maybe a roping contest with the early cowboys out here, or maybe a bucking horse contest to see who could ride the longest. It could be a shooting contest to see who is the best target shooter. Usually people would work, say, 5.5 days a week. Most people had Saturday afternoon off, and Saturday afternoon was the time to go to town to get supplies for the following week if they had any, or to trade whatever the goods they may have produced during the week. And so you get these people gathered in town Saturday afternoon. They talk about the streets everywhere being lined with horses and buggies or wagons at that time, and later on cars parked around. People have come together and they say, well, let's make a day of it. We're cleaned up and dressed up and things are okay at home. So what are we going to do this evening? Maybe have a dance that night, or maybe a communal meal, and be around. Everybody's dressed up, so we'll see you tomorrow at church. There were literary societies where you'd pass books around and have reading circles and discuss the books, the literature of the period. There was also times where somebody might put on a one-man play. A lot of people were musicians. Some of them could play multiple instruments. But this way, people could get together, they could have a band, they could sing songs. And
most every community had a fiddle player. And you could always find a piano player, they might have a harmonica, just whoever they could get together to play. And they did go around the countryside and play at different towns.
The dance in the summertime could be outside. Maybe there was a platform set up, or maybe just a packed place of earth. In the wintertime, it could be in a barn or a big granary where people would join up, or even in a schoolhouse and move the desk to the side and have a dance in there, because a lot of times the schools did have a piano in them as one musical instrument.
They had a dance going up in a Morgan building, and they were quite the dances. Everybody had their trunk open. Prohibition days were on then, but that's where they would go out to get their drinks. But they were wild dances. But later on, and it was after I was out of school, they had family dances, and it would be old-time music with the fiddles and
then with people with guitars and banjos and horns and drums and saxophones, harmonicas. It was just a hodgepodge of a lot of stuff that made a lot of great music. They could also entertain. They could be a band or even a more instrumental band. A lot of the small towns had the cornet bands that would play in the park in the summertime. They would play as dignitaries came to town.
The connection of music continues to bring people together in the small communities of the Great Plains.
I'm Bev Rucker, and I am one of the co-conductors of the Pride of the Prairie Orchestra, which is a community orchestra based in Colby. It was started by Dr. Beck in 1979, and it's a chance for non-professional musicians in the area to get together and make music. We have people from Nebraska and Colorado and Kansas that drive in. Some of them are driving an hour and a half to get to Colby so we can make music together. And the musicians are so much fun to work with. They make it so easy. We have young kids, so some of our string players, this gives those kids that are taking private lessons on strings a chance to play in an ensemble. And we have community members that might be just recently graduated from high school, or college kids that come play. We have adults that have been playing. Our concert mistress just retired. She's been playing with us since the very beginning in the 70s. And so we've got people of all ages and stages. Some were music majors, some were music teachers. A lot of them were just people that played in high school and had fun with it, and it gives them a chance to keep playing. Music is, it's how, in my opinion anyway, it's how we interact emotionally. Music is emotions in a way that words by themselves can't be. And when we come together and make music together, it builds connections between those of us that are playing and those of the people that come and listen to it. And when we get done with a concert or a good rehearsal, we're all smiling and laughing, and it brings us together and helps bring connections and peace.
As towns were developed, people would come to town and there would be big crowds. And so one of the things was to have some place where they could join. So almost every town had some sort of opera house or theater. The opera houses were kind of designed to have good acoustics in them, big open areas, and do a concert in the opera house or have a play and advertise it beforehand and come. And then there was always a review in the newspapers on how well it was. And Grainfield is down along the Kansas Pacific Railway. Grainfield had an opera house that was very well known. It was along the railroad, so it was easily accessible by a lot of people, not only the locals, but also acting troupes.
The Opera House was built in 1887 by the Grainfield Town Company. The ground floor was used for retail spaces. At the same time, they had their stage shows, traveling group shows upstairs, boxing matches in later years. They even had movies on the weekend. They'd have their dances, celebrations, weddings, you name it, upstairs here.
That opera house had fallen to disuse. It had been used at one time after an opera house as, to my understanding, a livery stable. It had been used for a car dealership.
In 1995, it was in very poor shape. It was starting to fall down.
The community got together, they raised funds, they filled out the grants, they talked to the Kansas Historical Society about the right way to redo it. They researched all the history.
And we got our Heritage Trust Fund grants and got the roof on it, windows put in it, closed the building up and saved it.
They took years to do that. They got it organized, they got it together. They had technical help from the Kansas Historical Society with their numerous architects and designers and historians. And it is used as a public place again for all sorts of things. Whether you're displaying art, you can rent the building for special events.
We have a lot of community functions in here. We have weddings, anniversaries, reunions. You know, it's a good place to where that people can come in and gather around their family.
The Grainfield Opera House has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places. A very well done job, and one of the oldest intact opera houses in northwestern Kansas.
I think it does give the community an identity. It's not very often that you can find a building this old in this neighborhood that still exists.
People mostly did take Sundays off. You know, there's no cowboy sayings that there were no Sundays west of the Missouri that you work 7 days a week. It wasn't that way. People always needed to have the religious connection in most cases and also needed a day of rest. So Sundays were very important. Picnics in the summertime, swimming, even small resort areas were established nearby here in Sheridan County so that people could on weekends do stuff such as swimming, see a rodeo, see demonstrations of tower diving, as well as in the winter, ice skating. Near the small town of Tasco, which is actually between halfway between Studley and Hoxie. There were two ponds that were started, and they were kind of competitive. They were started in the 1920s. One of them was called the Houseworth Recreation Area, or the Houseworth Lake, and the others was Ewers, E-W-E-R-S, another family. Nearby, they were within a half mile of each other.
The resorts near Tasco were remembered in the memoir One Man's Journey by Fred C. Connard.
Both had swimming with bathhouses, diving boards, slides, etc. Both places had baseball fields. At Ewers, they had tennis courts and horseshoe pits. Also a 50-foot-high diving tower with a platform on it. I had a second cousin, Lester, who was quite a daredevil. On special times like the 4th of July night in the summer, he would do his fire dive. He would climb to the 50-foot platform and all the lights would be switched off. He would douse his full-body bathing suit with gasoline, set it afire, and dive. It was quite an attraction, that flaming dive in the darkness, and people would come from all over northwest Kansas to watch it.
Actually, when I first came to Cottonwood Ranch in 1985, I would have people stop in and say, you know, I used to come with my parents to this place, or my grandparents. I said, here? I said, no, there's a big pond here. And there were rodeos and stuff. I said, no, that's 8 miles away. And it was people that would come drive 75 miles to come to one of these things on a weekend, because there's a lot of activity going on, there's a lot of people, something for everybody, as I understand it. So there was a lot of things to do. There were also traveling entertainment companies that were trained actors, and some of them would come through on a regular schedule, maybe a couple times a year, but present different plays of different things, and those were always important.
The importance of those sorts of artistic opportunities came home for one Northwest Kansas resident when she traveled back from a performance career overseas.
I am Bonnie Cameron, and I am the founder and artistic director currently of the Main Street Arts Council. I grew up here in Hoxie, Kansas, and went to study vocal performance at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Then I went on to get my master's in vocal performance at the conservatory in Berlin, the Hochschule für Musik Hans Eisler. And I was in Berlin and in Germany in general for almost 12 years. I finished my master's degree over there and then sang opera professionally. And my husband and I decided to make the move back to the United States. And we started in Hoxie because I knew I could have a voice studio and get started. And as I looked around the community, realized there were no more piano teachers. There were about 4 kids in the high school choir, maybe 6 kids in the high school band, and it just kind of broke my heart a little bit. And so my husband and I decided to actually just stay and see if I could, be a teacher here, start with voice lessons and piano lessons. I started my voice studio, and we did our first production in the summertime, and afterwards everybody was like, well, what are we doing next year? And that overwhelmed me a little bit because I hadn't really thought that far into the process, and then everything kind of organically grew from there. And the next year we did another show, and the year after that we did 2 shows. And so we started a nonprofit and founded the Arts Council in 2015, and that's when everything really took off, with all just realizing the need from all of the communities coming in. And I was willing to drive. It was not a planned thing, but it was very organic in how it grew, and I became very overwhelmed and asked Karl to join me and help me grow this as we had more need and more excitement and more energy going into the program.
We've done, of course, different arts programming through the years, primarily in Hoxie to start with, doing some art classes and workshops, community choir, delved into the theater realm with kids performances and community performances. We're also excited because we're adding an adult production of Little Women, the musical. There's lots of talented individuals out there, who may have an affinity for music and theater and the arts and all that. And, when they get to the adult age, there's not always programming out there for that kind of stuff. So we're hoping to be able to do some more shows throughout the year.
Our background is really theater, so we started with the theater. We wanted to add a fine arts component, and we did start the Main Street Art Walk. And this year we're going to expand our art walk from Hoxie, and we'll have one in Quinter and also in Atwood. There's a lot of other communities that do really well with also having their own art walks, and we don't want to ever infringe on that. So Goodland has a really great art walk that is established in Colby as well. So we're focusing just on the communities that just don't have that opportunity.
We grew our kids' performance series into what we call now the Main Street Summer Theater Festival, and we produce children's musicals across the Northwest Kansas region. Primarily at this time, we've been doing shows in Atwood, Colby, Hoxie, Goodland, and Quinter. A big part of our mission and why we do the theater festival in particular is to provide those opportunities for the kids here. There's lots of talent, there's lots of creativity. The programs are free for all the kids to participate. We don't want that a fee to ever be a hindrance, and so we do our best to do as much fundraising as we can ahead of time. And we've gotten a lot of fantastic support from the different area community foundations through grant funding. Dangy Hansen Foundation has been amazing, and we're so grateful for all of that support. We even have been able to get some funding over the last couple of years through the state from the Kansas Creative Arts Industries grant. And then we always seek out, funders through the local businesses, and because we really want to make sure that, the community is invested in this. As we've grown in our awareness and reputation, funding is getting a little bit easier, which is pretty exciting.
It's kind of funny because we did start with basically, the first show probably cost about $300, and now the festival has almost a $100,000 budget. And we pay our directors, our choreographers, and our interns. So we are kind of also creating economic positions in the arts in rural America, which is really exciting.
Another source of entertainment that carries on the small town culture of the Great Plains is the county fair.
In the early days, county fairs were developed fairly early. Once you get some people out here and they started growing things, whether they're vegetables in their garden, or produce as they were called, or might have a prize-winning livestock. The way to advertise it was at the county fair. But it was a social thing to start out. The entertainment might be musicians. Horse racing was very popular. So carnivals came in. Carnivals with rides that you didn't see. You couldn't go more than 20 miles an hour in a vehicle, but a carnival ride on a Ferris wheel, not only could you go high, but you could go kind of fast. And then there was a time that there was a lot of traveling carnivals coming through the Great Plains, and there still are a few, but they became unreliable. So a lot of northwestern Kansas started what they called the home-owned carnivals.
I'm Ellen Pratt. I'm the secretary of the Sheridan County Amusement Company. Sheridan County Amusement Company was formed in 1981 by a group of local people.
And from these carnivals that had quit, they bought the equipment. They rebuilt it. And so they started out small with maybe a couple of rides that would be used a couple times a year.
I know they started with a handful of rides, about 5, I think. We now currently have 10 rides. We run anywhere from 10 to 12 game booths during the carnival itself.
Everybody's welcome. There is no problem. They make a lot of money. They bring a lot of people to town, and to put it kind of local phrase, it's a hoot. Everybody has fun.
We operate 3 days out of the year, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, during our county fair. We have 17 people on our board. We have a grocer, we have electricians, we have welders. We're able to basically do all of our own work. And it takes a lot of preparation, ordering prizes, getting all the concession stand food, that kind of thing. It takes us about 2.5 to 3 months to get everything ready, and then it takes us about 2 days to tear it down and put it all away. Our carnival itself is 100% volunteer. It's all local people that volunteer to help run the carnival. It takes about 150 people per shift per night, and there's 2 shifts every night. Families, church organizations, businesses, just individuals. And some people, it's the same people that they want their same job, same shift every year.
Everybody goes basically every night to visit, to eat, and to have fun.
It's a huge community thing. One year we put up a map of the United States and had little pins for people to mark where they were from. And we had pins from coast to coast, and even had people write in the margins that they were from overseas somewhere, just happened to be in the neighborhood. How many people are actually on our grounds? I have no clue. I just know it's elbow to elbow sometimes. And we actually several years ago started giving away scholarships to graduating seniors. And we average 4 seniors a year. They each receive $500. And it is based basically on what community service they have done themselves, because that's what we are, is community service.
Community-owned carnivals brings people to town just as it always did, but it helps to maintain the culture of people see each other. The other cultural things, the schools bring them in the winter, but in the summer it's the community fair.
Our carnival has become the time when a lot of families do family reunions. A lot of classes do class reunions.
Everybody joins together, the whole town, parade, rodeo, carnival, see what the 4-H kids did. There's all sorts of activities, and people can see what others are doing at a good time of the year, and it has maintained the culture. The entertainment, such as a carnival or a winter sporting events, brings the people together, and so they can see other faces and visit with them one-on-one and make a lot of friendships. This is very important even today with the sparsity of the population. A lot of people become isolated by watching their TV set or their smartphone or listening to the radio, and they don't have the person-on-person contact that they used to have.
Well, I think it's very important. You know, it gets people together, see people you haven't seen. You know, once in a while we'll have a kid show up that they've lost their parents, and so we have to go find them. Well, it's not the kid that gets lost, it's the parent that gets lost, because they're off visiting with somebody and they say, oh, I'll be right here, but then they see somebody else and they wander off, you know. So, I think it's just a good time for people to get together and forget about all their worries and just have a good time.
I love living out on the high plains. I love the geography. I love being able to see for miles. I love being able to see those storms as they're rolling in. And even more so, I love the people that live out here.
I guess something I'm deriving from that a little bit is these communities were hungry for this.
I feel like they were very hungry for it. Kids that never had ever been on the stage were experiencing it for the first time and coming alive in that moment of just that sensation of being on the stage and learning a part and having an audience in front of them, or even just the camaraderie between everybody amongst themselves on the stage was pretty magical development. But yes, there was a hunger.
Things like the orchestra and things that bring us to, anything that brings us together as community out here just helps that whole feeling of interconnectedness and supporting each other and helping each other and being one village out here, as opposed to just a bunch of individuals that are plugging away trying to make it on their own. We're family.
Thank you.